All right, we should be live. So welcome to WorldQuant Office Hours number, I think 15, if I do my math correctly. Week 4, Unit 1. Let's see who is out there joining us today for WorldQuant Office Hours. All right, just double checked and looks like the stream is going through using the link we provide. All right, so I see that Madiha is here, Amadara is here. Welcome to Office Hours. Hello, guys. Good morning. On my agenda is continue progress on the PW Mini project. I see that Shakiba is here and Sandipan is here. Hello, guys. Welcome to Office Hours. Hope everyone is doing fine today. All right, so let me know about additional topics to throw up on the board. But the current agenda is to continue on the PW Mini project. I see Tom is here. Hello, Tom. I see Sumyadeep is here. Hello, good morning. Kinjal is here. Hello, Kinjal. Sonic is here. Lyndon Smith. Hello, guys. Welcome to Office Hours. Familiar names, familiar faces, so to say. All right, guys. Let me know about additional topics to throw up on the agenda. Currently, right now, I have is continue progress on the PW Mini project. There are a couple of things I want to talk about with Q2 before we move on to Q3. But do let me know about additional topics you want me to throw on the board. All right, so where we left off yesterday is we found the items by BNF name. And you remember that what the grader wants, it wants you to return which of these item total pairs had the greatest amount. So I could go through here and find which of these had the greatest amount. I could do that. But this is a bit tedious. So I can do this a little more systematically by using the max function. But if I use a max function, is this really the max? All right, someone's saying is wondering if it makes sense to use default dict from collections for the calculation here. All right, and I see Tom's question. I'll get to that just in a bit. So I could take something like max and figure out what is the max. But however I look at this, is this really the max? What does this really mean? I see this cannot be the max. In fact, if I look at items by BNF name, there's obviously some that have a higher number than 6. So what appears to be happening is that it looks like it is finding the max just by the first value of this tuple. So we have basically the BNF name here, BNF, and the total, and so forth. All these different pairs. Yeah, so we got to modify max here. And the way we do that, so by default, max is going to look, the way it's going to assess which of these tuples is the greatest, we have to check, not by default, it's going to check this position here. However, using the max function, we can tell it to use a different criteria to assess the items in this collection. So we have a list of tuples, and by default, max is going to look at which has the max 0 index of the tuple. But what we want to do is the criteria is let's score assess which one's the greatest by the 1 index of the tuple. So let's try that out. In max, there is a keyword argument called key. And what key is, we give it a callable, we give it a function. And it's going to take that function and use it on all the items in the collection. And what this function should return is the criteria to score the elements, the criteria used to find the max of the elements. So since we want to score the criteria by the 1 index, we need to define a function that's going to accept a tuple, and it's going to return what we want to be evaluated for that tuple. In other words, what is the criteria to assess what is max? And that is total. So we define a function. You could do it right here. Define a function called find criteria or something like that. Let me just say criteria. A criterion, if I want to be pedantic, accepts my tuple, and it's going to return the 1 index of the tuple. So then if we pass this function here in key, what's going to happen is that max is going to take this function and use it on all the tuples we have. And it's going to get with the output of that function for all the tuples, and that's what it uses to figure out what is the max. So let's try this out. And we get this response here, and this looks like it's probably the correct answer since it's over 100,000, and I don't think there's anyone that's out there that has 100,000. So yes, we can use max here. Now my question to you is, did we need to define this named function, or was there something else we could have done that could have simplified this? All right, I see Anna saying there's people on the other link, and what they need to do is they need to hit refresh. Make sure to hit refresh or reload or reload. So Anna, if you can tell them to just simply hit refresh on their browser. What happens is, and this seems to be a new occurrence in YouTube that I've seen, is that if you go onto the link before the stream starts and you keep it on, even though I start and I go live, they have to manually hit refresh and reload on their browser. So if I'm starting a stream and someone comes in afterwards, it's fine. But if they come in before it goes live, then that's the problem. It's a new quirk in YouTube apparently. I haven't experienced this. This wasn't never issued previously, but thank you, Anna, for you informing the people on there to hit refresh. Yeah, it's weird, and like I said, this was never an issue in previous cohorts. We've never had this problem, and we started experiencing it a lot recently. I don't know, maybe YouTube changed how things work. It's a little bit annoying since you have to hit refresh. It's a little annoying. I know some people are just coming in, and I'll go ahead and look at the chat, take some questions. But people coming in, welcome to Office Hours. Sorry about the quirks in YouTube these days. You do have to hit refresh afterwards. yeah, do let me know anything to throw on the agenda for today. So my progress, my objective, at least for today, is go through the PW Mini project. If you missed the first 5 minutes, keep in mind that we do record these. We have the playlist, so you can look up that time that you missed out. It's not ideal, so sorry about that. But you have to make sure you hit refresh, reload on the page for the stream to finally go through. Unfortunately, that's a weird quirk these days in YouTube. I'm gonna look at the chat and see what people are saying while people are joining with us. And someone is saying, Kinjal is saying, I was wondering if you can make sense to use default dict from collections for calculations here. Default dict might come into play, for example, might come into play in the way we handle this situation here. So if you do find yourself having to initialize a dictionary with some default value, you might want to look into default dict. It cuts down a little bit of number of lines of code, so that could have helped out using default dict. Let's see here. Let me think about this. Here, default dict wouldn't make sense when we're finding the total number of items for each group, but it could have helped out in how we did the grouping. All right, and Tom is saying they experimented with the group function. And yes, what you see is what is expected. That is correct. Because now your keys are tuples. However, you might need to reformat your answer if it's a tuple of length 1 to just be the string. So you might need to reformat your answer so you can get it into the format of a string and a number as opposed to a tuple with a string and then the number. Now, I see someone saying they use the counter class to calculate this answer, and that could have worked out as well because the counter class is a dictionary-like object in Python that allows us to easily count something. So let me think about that. So if we go through our groups and we want to do the sum of scripts, so that would not have worked out because we're not trying to find how many there are. We want to find the sum of the items field of scripts. So using counter would not have worked, I believe. Okay, so going back to my question about what we could have done here is, yes, we could have used a lambda or anonymous function. And remember that lambda anonymous functions are great when I need to use a function and I'm only going to really use it for one time only, and it's a rather simple function. So here, notice I formally defined this function and I specified it here. However, I'm probably going to use this function just once. It's just really one line. So instead, I can use a lambda function, lambda x, x1. So let's try that again. Use our anonymous lambda function, and we get the same value. Okay, so someone's saying, let me look at what's happening in the chat here. I see Thomas saying 2 points here. When I sort postcode alphabetically, a postcode like N23 1XX comes before N5 1XX. And yes, that is correct because when you sort alphabetically, 2, it's going to say comes before the alphabet of 5. So we have N and N, so that's a type, so that's tie right there. So it moves on to the next character, which is 2, and 2 comes before 5. So that is why N23 1XX comes before N5. All right, let me see what's going on here. Someone's saying, Q1, I worked fine, but my grader isn't going beyond 0.83. Am I missing something? If you're not, what that means is that you're missing one of these fields you're not getting correct. One of these fields, either total, average, S, Q25, medium, and 75, you're getting incorrect. Keep in mind that you interpret them correctly. The total is the sum. Is the sum of all of them. Maybe that's what you're not doing. Okay. All right, so let's see. I see Kinja. Yes, that is correct. Yep, thank you. We're going to use the lambda functions. Yep, so one of your stats is wrong. So take a look at that, and hopefully you can fix that. All right. And then what's next is just format your answer, pass it to the grader, and get your answer assessed. Okay, any questions people have, do let me know. Especially people who are just joining us, do let me know. I did it a little differently, but this is more crisp. Well, yeah, thank you. That's why we go through these things, right? Check it out. All right, let's talk about this group by fields function that we talked about yesterday. And so if you're a little interested in how it works, we talked about it yesterday. But essentially what we are doing is we're going to have a function to do this grouping for us. This is something we might want to do throughout this mini project. Instead of copy and pasting, it's better that we encapsulate this functionality into a function so that's ready for us to be used anytime we call upon it. So it accepts our data, something like scripts or practices. Fields here is a tuple. Fields here is a tuple of the fields we want to group by. Iterates through the data. It goes ahead and constructs what is the key we use based upon the values of fields. And it does the grouping. So this will allow us to group by more than one field, which will come into play later on in our mini project. And the other thing that I'm going to define, because I find myself using constantly, is I'm going to define a function that if you give it an iterable, a list of dictionaries, and you give it a key, it will compute the sum of all the values for that given key. In other words, we just did this yesterday, or we just did this here previously. If we go here, notice how I wanted to calculate the sum of all the values of the item's key. This is something we have to keep on doing and doing again throughout this mini project. So it's better that I encapsulate it into a function. So I'm going to call this define. I'm going to call this sum values. Sum values. It's going to accept my data, and it's going to accept a key. As I said before, what it's going to do, it's going to iterate for D in data. It's going to get that dictionary, get the value for that given key, and then return the sum. And I'll put a little doc string right here that says return the sum of all values of a given key. Got a syntax error. Syntax error often indicates I forgot a certain keyword or misspelling right there. It's return, not return. All right, so this goes ahead and corrects it. I see Victor is here. Hello, Victor. Hello, Owen. Welcome, officer. Andre is here. All right, thank you for pointing out that mistake. It's return. So now I've defined this function. Then what I can do is over here, what I can do is I can say for groups dot items, and I can say for group and scripts, kind of what I did before, but now I'm using list comprehension. I didn't do list comprehension before, but I can do list comprehension here. A little easier to do, see it. And for group scripts and group items, I have the group here, and I call sum values on the scripts and the key items. And notice I get the same result. So here I'm able to use list comprehension because this code right here was a little bit complicated. Had this extra line here, and it was easier if I encapsulate this process into a function and invoke that function when I do my list comprehensions. So the sum value function will come very important as you move on with this mini project. All right, do let me know if there are any questions before we move on to Q3. All right, let's talk about what is going to happen with Q3. So with Q3, we want to figure out, let's see, find the total items prescribed for each postal code. So find the total number of items prescribed for each postal code. So we look at scripts, we say, okay, let's go ahead and define it for, I can say, okay, I can group by the postal code, kind of what we did before, but on a different field. But notice that my scripts data doesn't contain any information about postal code. However, it does contain information about the practice. So if I look at the practice data set, here I do have the postal code. So what this tells me here is that what I need to do is I need to perform a join. I need to join these two data sets together based upon the value of practice and code. Because once I perform that join, then I know what is the postal code for that record. So in other words, you can think of your data set as a table with multiple rows. And here is another data set. So here's scripts, and here is practices. And for a given problem, our row is a dictionary. Our row is a dictionary, and you can view that each key value pair as a column in this table. Each key is a column, and the value is a given value for that column for that given row. And what's very common is that we distribute our data across multiple data sets, so that if we want to make use of some field in practice, we've got to join these two data sets together. In other words, we got to take, let's say, the first row and find its matches on this other data set. And here we're going to perform a match via the practice code. If we go here, there's something called practice, a column called practice, and we want to look for the row of this practice data set in which practice and code are equal to each other. We want to join them on this field here. And then we want to go on to the next row, look up the practice value, and look for the match. Where is its match here in the second data set. Where does practice and code equal to each other? Oh, that's the match. Bring them in together and go down and repeat the process. And after we do this, now our scripts data set will have all the information of the practice postal code, and then we can do group by and do our analysis. Someone says, where can we find Office Hours 15? It's not on the playlist for Office Hours, so let me go ahead and just spend a moment just to make sure that it went through, that it is accessible. And I may not have tagged it to the playlist. So let me just do that right now. Office Hours 14 was yesterday, so there is no 15. If I read your question right, there is no there is no Office Hours 15 because that's the current one right now, if I do my math correctly. And Office Hours for Monday should already be on the playlist, but let me just double check that, just in case. It may not be. Okay, so sorry I forgot to link Office Hours 13 to the playlist. I apologize, but it should be in there now. So go ahead and take a look at that right there. So sorry about that, but I just added it right now to the playlist. Take a look at it. It should be on the playlist. And sorry about that, but if that happens again, just let me know, and I can correct it as soon as possible. You can also post on the forum, the question forum. Hey, Office Hours, this one is missing. Sometimes I goof off and I forget to add it to the playlist, so sorry about that. But anyways, let's go ahead and keep on marching on. So we got to perform a join. And then once we perform the join, then we can group by postal code and then find the total number of items or the maximum number of items, whatever it's asking us to do. Now, one little deviation here, or one little thing that's going to throw our plans awry or array, whatever you how to pronounce that word, is that there are certain practices with more than one postal code. There are certain practices that for some reason have more than one postal code. Data in real life is messy. There are bad encodings. There are mess ups. The whole point here is that we need to take some sort of action, be aware of it, and sometimes it's a trade-off. Sometimes it might just be too much work to fix the problem, and that problem might not be has much great impact. So what we're going to do here is to rectify the problem or the situation that there are more than one postal code for each practice. We want to use the alphabetically first postal code for a practice that has more than one postal code. So in other words, if we have a practice that has a postal code, so a practice has postal code, ABC, another one has XYZ. These are postal codes that don't make sense. And postal code GHI. Then the postal code we assign for that practice should be ABC. Yes, we did look at the VC last question in Office Hours. Yes, we did. In fact, if you look at the shared drive, we have a notebook from the ML course that has shows you a little more about k-means. So do look at the shared drive and the office hours directory for a notebook that goes a little more in depth into k-means clustering from the notebooks for Unit 2. Okay, so that means that for this practice, we assign it this postal code. So what we got to do first now, before we do any grouping, any joining or whatever, is we need to create a mapping between practice and a single postal code. Now, every time you find yourself that I want to create something that maps this to that, you got to think about dictionaries. Let's use a dictionary that's going to hold the mapping or that associates a practice with a single postal code. In fact, dictionaries in other programming languages are called associative arrays because you associate something with something else. You associate a key with a value. The first thing we got to do is let's go through all our practices and create this mapping from practice to postal code. So let's try that out. So we talked that we want a dictionary. So we initialize our dictionary. We iterate through each of the practices. And what we're going to do is we first check whether that practice code exists in our dictionary. And if it does exist in our dictionary, then we've got to, what that means is that there is more than one postal code for a given practice. So what we got to do is we got to pick the minimum, which one is the smallest. So in other words, we might have a postal code already XYZ in our dictionary, but then we see that we have ABC, so we have to return the minimum. So we're going to use the min function. So it's the minimum of practice and post code. This here is the newest postal code for the practice, the one we just encountered right now. And we got to compare it with the one we already have in our table, in our dictionary. And the one that we already have in our dictionary is practice postal. And we say practice, and we access the postal code right there. Sorry, we access the practice code right there. And we do min. And this will return a single value, the minimum of these two. Okay, so let's go and recap that. So right here, this is the postal code for the given for the given iteration. And this here is a postal code we already have on file, so to speak, already have in our dictionary. And we are returning the min. If it doesn't exist, well, that means we got to create the entry here. So I can say practice and post code. So now if I run this here, I'm ready to go. And probably I should have done here is we can take a look at the length of practices. I can say just as a count, something just to look at. Let me say number of practices, the length of practices. And we can print out number of unique practice codes. And I can say for P in practices, and the length of P code syntax error. Let's see. too many errors here. Let me figure out where my mistake is. Okay, code, and I'm taking the entire, there we go. That should work out. All right, so basically what I did here is up above, I figured out the number of practices. Here I iterate through all the practices, take out the code, figure out the length of this set, and yeah, so sure enough, we see if we look at the data, is that there are about 12,000 practices and 10,000 unique practice codes. All right, so let me see if people have any questions about what we did here about this mapping. Let me take a look at what's going on in the chat here. Someone's saying, could there be a problem with the server? I'm unable to open my PW project. So Kinjal, do let me know if are you receiving some sort of error or some sort of message while you open it up? Is it too slow? Let me know. And I will, afterwards, I can take a look around and see if everything is fine on your side. But do let me know if you are receiving some error message or what's the problem exactly. And I will make a note here. Afterwards, look at your pod to make sure everything is fine. Let me look at what Tom is saying. I used a for loop and the less than for each practice. Yours is more efficient. I wouldn't say mine isn't particularly more efficient. I would say you could have also used the less than symbol right here. Min becomes very important when we want to find the min or the max of a large array of values. There's a couple of questions of what's going on here. And what is going on here is I want to figure out the number of unique practice codes. So that means I want to use a set. So for pre and practices, then what I do is I pull out the practice code. So this is a set of all the unique practice codes. And I use curly braces since I'm using set comprehension. And then I want to figure out the length. And since I want that to be embedded in a message, I'm going to use format strings, F strings. And an F string, if you recall, is if I have a variable A, I can say print F string and then say, hello, the value of A is, and then in curly braces, I put the variable right there, or I put the Python expression. So it takes this here inside the curly braces, it evaluates it, and it puts its value, the curly braces, is a placeholder. All right, Emmanuel, if you're you have please assist. I'm struggling to connect to the kernel. So what I want you to do, also Kinjal, if you can go ahead and tell me your username. Don't give me your password. Give me your username. I can always look up your password. I don't want it to be here. Emmanuel, just the same thing. Let me know your username so that I can look at your pod afterwards and just make sure everything is up and running. All right, someone is saying, can we add pickle? Yes, I'll add pickle to the agenda, so maybe that's something we can talk about tomorrow. I will add pickle to the agenda. Pickles, all right. Is A an expression or variable? Here, A is a variable because I define A equals 1. But it could have been something else, like it could have been 1 plus 2, or 1 plus 3. That could have been an expression. So it's a variable or a Python expression. And here I use a Python expression. All right, so once we've done this here, let's go ahead and check that we did it correctly. We have this assert statement, and sure enough, we got the correct answer. And now we are ready to perform the join. So you might be wondering, what is going on here? What is this little weird symbol here? Well, what we want to do is we have our scripts list, but we don't want to modify that list. Remember that lists are mutable in Python. Lists can change. But we don't want our original data set to change. We don't want to manipulate it. we want to do is we want to create a copy. So if I were to sketch that out, we have our list here, scripts, and we'd want to keep it just as is, just like we had before. So what we want to do is we want to clone this into a new list, so that with the clone we can modify the clone and it doesn't modify the original. So you want to create a copy of a list. And a quick way to create a copy of a list, so I say my list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is we can take a slice. And a slice always returns a copy. A slice of a list always returns a copy. So in other words, if I say :3, that returns a slice. This returns a new list. And I can prove it to myself. I can call a variable called sublist. It's equal to this slice here. And I can say sublist 0 equal to -1. And then I can look at my list, and notice my list hasn't changed. Let me recap what I did there. I create a list. I took a slice from that list and I assigned it to a variable, but a slice returns a copy. So that changing the copy will not change the original. So here, I proceed to modify the copy. I change position 0 to be -1. I look at the original and it's not modified. So slices returns copies. So what that means, if I say my list copy, and I say my list : this here is a slice, return slice from 0, since I don't specify a start index, and since I don't specify an end index, it goes from 0 all the way to the end, including the end. So now, if I look at my list copy, and let's say I change one of the values to be -1, and I look at my list, the original is not modified. So what I do here is I create a copy of this list so that if I modify joined, I do not modify the original. Now we got to perform the join. So we iterate through all the dictionaries in joined, and what we're going to do is we are going to look up the practice code. So I can say post, we're going to look up, the practice code, right? Practice code is equal to script practice. And just sometimes it's nice to have the data right in front of us. I can look at joined now. I haven't run that script, that cell. Let's look at scripts. So here we're going to look up the practice code. So that's our practice code. And then we're going to create a new key value pair in our dictionary. And that new key value pair is going to have the postal code. And I know for a given practice code, I know how to look up the postal code because I have it in this mapping right there. I have it in that dictionary right there. So in other words, if I take this practice code right there, I take it, I copy it, and I say practice posto, then I get the posto code. So I have the mapping, the dictionary that goes from practice code to postal code. So then I iterate through each of my prescriptions. I get the practice code. I look up the practice code with this dictionary, and I create a new key value pair in my prescription data set that has postal code equal to the postal code for the practice that wrote out that prescription. So practice postal, practice code. And now, if I looked at joined, if I look at this one, if I look at joined and I look at the first position, notice I have a new key value pair. Where is it? Postcode. And it's equal to this one here, which is what I basically did manually. Right before I took this one, I copied this, then I used the mapping to get the postal code, then I did it programmatically across all the ones, and I look at the dictionary and I see the updated key value pair. All right, so would script equal join do it? So Tom is saying would script equals join do it, and the answer is no. Let me go back here. If I had done my list view and my list, this would have not worked out, because this here creates, then our list has two names. There are two names to refer to my list. You can call it my list or my list view, which is what I did here. So modifying one will have modified the other. And we can experiment with that. I can say my view change 0 to -1 and say my list, and notice it does get modified. So this would not have worked out. Let me look at the chat. There are a couple of things going on here, and I see some people are posting your username, so thank you. Because if I have your username, then I can better associate your accounts. And I thank you for letting me know, and I will take a look at that later today. Okay, just doesn't seem to load. All right, any questions of what I performed right here? So far I've created the mapping, the unique mapping, and now I've I brought in the postal information for prescriptions. That's that third step I need before I wrap up this question. Questions right now before I proceed. Okay, going to move on here. And now that we've joined it, now we are ready to do our analysis. Now let's see. Kinjal, you gave me your username, so let me write that down. All right. Okay, so now we are ready to go. And let's go ahead and do the next step. So now that I brought in, I can group by my post code. So let's try out to use that function that we've created before. We had that function called group by field. Let's try it out. I'm gonna say grouped is equal to group by field, and I pass the joined, and I group by post code. Remember, the function wants the keys as a tuple even though if it has only one field. So we create grouped. And now that we've created grouped, I want to calculate the sum of all the items prescribed for each group. And I had already created a function to do so. Remember, I create that function called sum values that accepts a list of dictionaries, accepts a key, and computes the sum of all the values for that given key. So that means I can do this very succinctly. I can say for post code scripts in grouped items, iterate through the key value pairs, the post code, and all the prescriptions for that post code, that list of prescriptions for that post code. And what I do is I have the post code right there because I want to have my answer as tuple of post code and the sum of all the items. Well, I have that sum values function. Let's give it the list of all the prescriptions for that postal code and the key to sum on. And I can call this, I don't know, postal totals all. I'm going to name error because I have a misspelling. And name errors most of the time are misspellings. And you probably think this guy cannot spell. All right, so let's take a look at a sample of our answers. Take a look at a sample of our answers. Okay. Someone is saying, let me look at the chat right here. Do let me know any questions of what we did right here. Let me look at the chat. Okay, someone is not able to access the discussion board. So let me take a look at that. This is Bismarck. And okay. Now I'll have to look at that, Bismarck, about your issue. Now my question to you, Bismarck, is: have you ever had access? Were you able to gain access to the discussion board previously? Okay. I see another question about not having access to the notebooks. Let's see, office hours notebooks. Let me take a look at that. Yeah, in some of those, I'll have to double check. Ragaraj, I may have not uploaded those, so I will have to go and upload those past ones that I may have not uploaded them. Some of the office hours, there was no notebook, so that's why they're probably missing, but I have to go upload some of those past ones. If there's one in particular that I'm missing, do let me know, but I'll put a little note here: upload missing notebooks. Sorry about that, and I'll upload those missing notebooks. All right, Bismarck, I will look into your issue. And let's see other people. I see Kinjal. I'm trying to figure out what you have done under practice posto. Is it okay if I ask you my questions after looked at the code again and made sense? Yeah, you can always ask me that after the fact. There's probably a different way I could have done this, but basically what I'm trying to do is create a single mapping between practice to postal code. Okay. What I do is, if you go into the share drive, you go to, view downloads, office hours notebooks. The notebooks that I create for office hours, I put up here. And in fact, one of them is the ML clustering notebook. It shows you a little more of what's happening with k-means. All right, I see someone saying, so far I have what you have, but only get 0.01 on the grader. So you're only getting 0.01 from the grader. And probably what's happening is, did you make sure to comment this line out? We're not quite done with this question, but what may have happened is you forgot to comment this line out, and then if you don't, then it defines this variable, and that what gets passed to the grader. And this has a default answer. That's probably what's happening there, but I could be wrong. But we're not quite out of the woods just yet, because if we look at what the question is asking for us, it's saying we want, if I go back here, take only results of the first 100 postcodes. And we don't have that just yet. The other thing that we need to rectify is, we want our answer to be a list of tuples of a string of the postal code and the total. Postal code and the total. But our answer is slightly different. We have a list of tuples. The 0 position isn't a string. The 0 position is a tuple. And then we have the total. 0 position is another tuple, and then the total. However, since I only care about, since this tuple is only of length 1, it's only of length 1, I can go here, here's this tuple, and I can just say, give me position 0. So if I run this again, and I run this again here, notice I have the format ready for the grader. And now what I can do is I can say post totals and call sorted on our postal totals and just take the first 100. And there's the first 100. And I'm ready to go. Of course, make sure you comment this line out, pass to the grader. I still don't get the correct answer. Let's see what I messed up there. I think I need to call it postal totals. There we go, postal totals. Comment that out. I still get the wrong answer because I probably have a misspelling. Let me just run this, see what I did. Postal totals. Spelling counts. Okay. All right, so don't forget the modification I did is I index the 0 index of that tuple, which is a string. I think it's fixed. I think it's fixed now. Let me know if there are any questions before we wrap up office hours. And for the people who are having issues, I will take a look at it. So do stay tuned. Hopefully I can rectify the problem as soon as possible. But thank you for bringing that up. Any quick questions people have before we wrap up office hours? Okay, so you're able to open up the PW notebook. Great. I'll still look into the issue, making sure everything is set correctly. But I'll still look into it, but glad it's working out now. All right, so with that said, guys, take care, and we will see you tomorrow.